Welcome to the latest episode of Payments Unfiltered. I'm your host, Theo Spyrides. I'm super excited for the conversation today with my guest, Michaela Weber. Michaela leads payments and global business development teams at BigCommerce, which is a NASDAQ-listed e-commerce platform that powers brands across 150 countries. Before this, she led partnerships at the European-based PSP, Molly, as well as being responsible for enterprise partnerships at WorldPay. She's also worked for corporate giants like Bain, JP Morgan, and Goldman Sachs. Today, we'll be talking about her career, the role that partnerships plays in the payments landscape, and e-commerce and the latest trends that she sees. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Your first day of your professional career was on Wall Street on September 15, 2008, which was also the same day that the Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy. So that's a pretty good first day in your professional career. What was that like? And is there a memory that sticks out?
Yeah, it's a great question, Theo. So that was my first. So I had gone through, joined Bank of America at that time, pre-Merrill Lynch, summer '08, which was quite an interesting analyst class to be part of. And my first day fully licensed on the desk was that Monday. So I remember waking up on that Monday morning, getting ready to go. I was working on the trading floor, and we had to be to work quite early, like 6:30 or 7 a.m., and seeing all the news. Everything had happened kind of Sunday night, Monday morning, and it was just really chaos. And a lot of the really experienced professionals felt that it was some of the most volatility they had seen since the late 80s, since Black Monday. And I just didn't know what was going on. You know, you're so new, you're so hopeful, you're just hoping to go and make a good impression and get everyone's coffee orders right. And I just remember the feeling on the trading floor, the energy, and how people were really concerned. And it ended up being a really defining period, just because I had hardly any idea what was going on for the first few weeks.
Sure.
And then quite a lot of change happening in the macro environment, and learning really quickly. And I still have some friends from my analyst class at that time. But it was, really something to remember, a moment in history.
I think it's super interesting because I wasn't working then, but you started your professional career in a bear market.
Yeah.
And then probably since then, we've just kind of been bull market. We had the bit around COVID, obviously, which was a bit turbulent, but generally, like, things have been good. Do you think that having that experience in such a difficult time has actually given you a different lens, maybe an edge against kind of people that have come since that haven't had that experience? Because you've seen things go badly, very badly, and probably have some skills or experiences that, other people may not.
I think so. So I was laid off in March of 2009. My whole analyst class was let go.
Okay.
So, and that was after a period where you heard, well, analysts are the cheapest. You're the cheapest labor on the trading floor. They never cut the juniors. The junior talent pipeline is very important. So had been operating in this period where I thought, actually, I'm going to be, obviously there's a lot of change, but I think I'm going to be fine. And so to be unemployed, essentially less than a year after graduating from university, having had this great job on paper with basically no skills, because let's be real, 7-8 months into a job, you don't really have a lot of transferable skills, was really interesting and tough. And I think that did teach me quite a lot of resilience, but also that you need to be aware, circumstances change, right? And just because you think that sometimes it's out of people's control, financial situation changes. And I was lucky to then land at a small firm that then ended up sending me to Hong Kong. And then I moved to JP Morgan in Hong Kong. And really that moment in my life started me on this kind of wild career journey that's taken me around the world and into different industries. But it is a really interesting moment in time to think back on. But I think that resilience, starting at a time when things are not always great, is really helpful.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that you're at JP Morgan, you're also at Goldman Sachs and at some time at Bain. How and why did you transition from these like global banks or global consultancy firms and go to payments?
Yeah.
That seems like an interesting
Because
transition.
payments is great. So I was at JP Morgan in Hong Kong, working in sales and trading. And I had done my undergraduate university at a small college in Western Massachusetts called Smith. And I was a government major and a German minor. And that does not give your parents confidence that you're ever going to really have a job that's going to pay your bills. So I then ended up kind of thrust into this Wall Street career, but felt that I didn't really have the financial analysis and strategy foundations to do that job. So while I was at JP Morgan, actually applied to MBA programs back in the US and made the decision to sort of step out of sales and trading to go back and do my MBA to try to kind of shore up that skill set and also just take a beat, you know? I mean, to your earlier question, I had started in the global financial crisis, had spent a period of time where I was just looking for a job, kind of regardless of career trajectory opportunity. Loved JP Morgan, felt incredibly supported, but felt that maybe sales and trading wasn't a career that had a lot of longevity for me or was a lifelong career. So made the reasonably unpopular decision to leave a very good job with great supportive colleagues to, in the words of one of my managers at the time, pay money not to work, which is how he viewed the MBA, to go back. And I went to Tuck at Dartmouth to kind of take that MBA, shore up those skills, and then ended up joining Goldman.
Awesome. And when you were at Tuck, you were the investment club co-chair, I think?
I did investment club, Outward Bound, which at Tuck is a famous kind of pre-starting class ritual where you go out in Maine and live on a small rowboat with 8 of your classmates for a week and jump in the water every morning at 6 a.m. and do a lot of very forced but fun team bonding. And I was an admissions associate, so I did admissions interviews and quite a lot of kind of fun extracurriculars. So that MBA was such a transformative 2 years for me to think about where I wanted to go. Where did I want to live? That was a big question for me, having been in New York and then Hong Kong. My family's mostly from the Northeast, and thinking about what skills I wanted to acquire in my next few roles to kind of set myself up.
And what took you from Goldman to WorldPay?
Yeah, so loved working at Goldman. As happens with many people, my husband was transferred for work. So sometimes when you have, family things or 2-career family, so he was transferred from New York to London. And so I initially had a period where I was working my US role from London, which is quite a time zone challenge, but worked out. And then felt that I was going to take that opportunity to actually build up my strategy experience because I had this great financial analytical experience at Goldman, but hadn't really done strategy. So I was looking at Ks and Qs and analyzing these companies based on financial tables and analyst decks without really understanding kind of how you can do the work. So was able to go over to Bain, had an amazing experience doing first an oil and gas project, which is what I had been doing at Goldman. So that was really fun. And then moved into their private equity group, doing diligences, and ended up doing quite a lot of fintech and payments work. And that's what led on to the opportunity at WorldPay to go over and run their global partners team.
Interesting. So you kind of fell into payments. It wasn't a deliberate move.
I think payments is really fascinating because it's such a rapidly evolving space and it touches everything. So if you're interested in retail or you're interested in the financial system, you're interested in core money movement, governments, everything comes back to payments. So I think there's so many directions you can take payments, and it really is a thread that runs through our society. So it's a really, really interesting place to take time and spend a career.
And what are the learnings that you can take from that time that you had at JP, Goldman, Bain, and then you go to probably a completely different environment at a fast pace, perhaps? I know when you joined WorldPay, they were just acquired by
FIS,
yeah. But probably still in a fintech that's trying to be innovative, push boundaries. What was that transition of culture like? Because I imagine that must have been quite a stark shift in ways of working and what how the company pace was.
It is a big shift. And I think one of the things when you work in consultancy or you work at a place like Goldman, because you're in client facing roles, the work happens very, very quickly, right? You just throw people at the problem. You're working weekends. There's quite a lot of focus on rapid deliverables. And in a consulting role, you're producing decks about the things that should happen. I mean, obviously there's implementation projects and things like that, but then you get inside at a company like WorldPay where you see that actually they had grown by acquisition. There's a number of interesting other platforms that are kind of bolted together. There are some people that have incredible industry knowledge. You have to build a lot of cross-functional awareness and stakeholders and get people on board. It's much harder in the real world than it is making slides about the things that should happen. And so I think it's really humbling, and also just the subject matter expertise. There's so many ramifications to making a process change at a large company. You have to have a real appreciation for knock-on effects and get those people on board and understand that you may be changing one little thing, but that may impact someone else who's in a different part of the org.
That's really interesting. And why did you formally end up in partnerships? It feels like your previous roles that we've just kind of looked at aren't necessarily partnerships roles. You might tell me to the contrary. But why was it that at WorldPay you're like, yes, partnerships is actually where I want to be?
So my roles on the trading floor, so I had been in equity sales role. So I had been in sales, which I think sales is a really important part of partnerships, and had been customer facing, client facing quite a lot, and felt that a partnerships role was a really effective way for me to capitalize on what I felt was a strength to build relationships, an interest in sales and commercial outcomes, and also just bringing people together. And so I think naturally, as a personality, I love to introduce people and make business connections. And I think that lends itself really well to being in partnerships. It's a really important foundation. So for me, it was a natural fit. But I would say I don't think that I knew at the beginning of my career that partnerships was a career path necessarily. Right? I don't think that that's something that when they send you the Excel sheet of the roles that you could do is on there. But it's such an interesting blend of really tangible skill sets. And I think partner people make great relationship managers. They can make great salespeople. So it's really a utility player type of role.
And it found you.
And it found me. And I think that's one of the things where as you have success in a role or see yourself making an impact, you naturally gravitate towards staying in roles that allow you to do that. And it's quite varied. I think no 2 days are the same. So I really like that, where 1 month you may be really focused on a specific partnership or a contract, a new negotiation, and then another month you may be focused on events and other go-to-market aspects. So, no 2 days are alike. I think they say that about a lot of jobs. But.
And in your experience, what's the key to forming a successful partnership, and especially in an industry as competitive as payments?
I think the key to forming a successful partnership in payments is to really understand what each party what success looks like for each party. Because one of the best ways to start a partnership is really transparency about why you want to do something. So I had a call with a partner a few weeks ago who's been a longstanding partner of BigCommerce, but we haven't done as much as we could with them. And they came and they said, look, one of our strategic goals is to build out our US business. We want to increase volume in the US, right? Just like that is how we define success. We'd like to grow our volumes with you by X. Let's talk about how we get there. And I think that was such a helpful starting place for me, because then I could say, okay, we can put EMEA and APAC to the side. Let's think about what that could look like, where our current US volumes are, what a growth path could be, how do we get there, what financial investment in marketing and events and things you may be willing to do. But that was so helpful versus me calling you and saying, hey, Theo, like, let's deepen our partnership. And I was like, okay, great. but we're a very global business. You know, a lot of companies are. There's a million different things we could do together. Why do you want to do that with us? What's the strategic priority for you? What does success look like? And the second piece is really tactically knowing how your counterparts at your partner are evaluated. So sometimes they're evaluated by the number of their products that your platform offers, or is it number of net new merchants? Is it volume? Is it leads generated from activities? Often they have really specific KPIs. And I think understanding that can help you create a partnership map that benefits everyone.
Interesting. So it's almost like you scratch my back, I scratch yours.
That's a partnership. That's how it is. I mean, but it's a joint success, right?
Yeah.
Because I think the true nature of partnerships and where a lot of people struggle is just as in real life, when relationships are really one-sided. And the foundations for a really great partnership are we're both achieving business goals that we have. And we may have very different goals, but if we can set ourselves up for success and say, your goal is to grow US merchant volume with us, our goal is to get net new merchants, how do we combine forces and see how can we do that together? If we add net new merchants that are using you, that helps me achieve mine, and you yours, right? But it can be really tricky for people. Sometimes people are uncomfortable disclosing to you how they're evaluated or their strategic focus. And I think that can be hard because, you know, we want to be in it together and win together. But if I don't know what you want out of it, it's tough.
That's really interesting. And do you think that same ethos, that same approach, or everything you just articulated, applies to other industries? Or do you think there's an element that's like specific to payments? Because when I look at the payments landscape, it's incredibly fragmented.
Mm-hmm.
And for it to work, all these different little bits need to get stitched together. Otherwise, no flow would ever work for a merchant. If you think about a payment, how many parties are involved, right? It can be 6, 7, 8 sometimes. So do you think there's a specific angle to everything you've just said that applies slightly differently to payments because of the kind of intrinsic importance of partnerships to make that ecosystem work?
I think a really successful partnership in any industry would be on this basis of joint success. But payments, to your point, is especially critical because also we have all these frenemies in the industry,
That's
right?
the word I have written down. It's like the best word.
Frenemies, because there are, so take, you know, Visa with Visa acceptance, so auth.net and CyberSource, you know, take PayPal with PayPal has the wallet. They also have BNPL. They also have other products. They're also doing core processing with Braintree and PPCP. So you can have a merchant that's on Adyen or Stripe using PayPal wallet. We need that to work really well together. But actually those companies compete in other aspects. And I think it is this notion of frenemies. And as orchestration layers or companies that offer some orchestration, that can also be viewed as both beneficial to a merchant and by some parties, disintermediation of a more classic setup. And so getting everyone to work together in payments is really critical. And that is that why partnerships is such a critical role.
And when you're building these relationships, obviously there's a component of investment to start building that relationship. Is training for triathlons and competing in Ironmans the most insane thing you've ever done to broaden your network?
So my triathlon background, which let's be clear, the Ironman completion was many years ago. I could not make it through an Ironman today.
I was incredibly impressed when I found this out.
So that came, I was living in Hong Kong, working at JP Morgan, and had a very sporty managing director who was running our group. And that was a really popular expat activity. That was an amazing way to build a network and travel in Asia and see places, and was super cool. At Big Commerce, we have a big cycling culture. So Brent Bellum, our CEO, is a very devoted cyclist. One of my colleagues, Matt Crawford, is like the Texas time trial champion for his age group or road race champion. He does crit racing. So I have been to Texas. I go to Texas quite a lot. That's our global headquarters. And I often ride bikes with them. And so I think actually last summer we went out on a bike ride in the morning and it was probably 34 degrees and extremely hilly. Coming from London, it's very flat. Um, and I really felt that it was possible. I was just going to keel over on the ride. And, you're with colleagues, you feel like you have to keep up. And went out actually in Vegas. We went out with some partners and customers on a cool ride out to the Hoover Dam um, at NRF last year, or not NRF, Shop Talk last year. We went out to the Hoover Dam on a bike ride, so that was cool. So I think cycling in the heat and from the Vegas Strip out to the Hoover Dam has been some of my more formative networking opportunities.
So basically what you're saying is if you want to have a career in partnerships and payments, you have to cycle.
Cycle or find things to do together. I think that's been a really interesting evolution of our industry. There's really a blowback on this notion of drinks or golf days. I'm not a golfer, so but I think finding fitness classes, going for walks, doing a cooking class with partners, which I've done, which is so fun to get the teams together, just things to have a human experience and build that relationship. You and I were talking about how important it is in an era of digital communication to have a really strong personal foundation. And I think getting out of a work context and getting to know people a little bit, however you want to do that, is extremely important to building these lasting relationships and having that foundation to fall back on. If you send me a Slack that I think is a bit too sarcastic or whatever, I can call you out on it.
Very cool. And so when you reflect on your career, is there one strategic partnership that stands out to you as a game changer and why? And it doesn't actually necessarily have to be one that you're a part of, but one partnership which is like the perfect example of that makes sense for both parties. I can see the mutual success and they've compounded each other to success.
So when I was at WorldPay, WorldPay was and still is, building and evolving in an omni-channel strategy, having had a competitor that in Adyen that has quite strong omni, so kind of in the definition of kind of unified commerce, in-store and online. And so I worked on the beginnings of WorldPay's partnership with FreedomPay, which is facilitating in-store payments, right, in-store POS, and works with some global hospitality groups and is a really great solution. And so I think that was a really great example of WorldPay, a really large company, working with a super innovative, smaller company that brought a lot to the table in terms of an opportunity to unlock a market that was going to be really difficult to build their own kind of native solution. And for FreedomPay, they work with a number of large PSPs, but continuing to work with these huge global organizations that broaden their base and expand them. So that's, I think, been a really interesting partnership to kind of keep an eye on. And I see them exhibiting next to each other at, retail expo and other things and a retail technology show. And I always feel like really proud of being a little bit of a part of the early stage of that relationship, because I think it makes a lot of sense.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's amazing. I think that's such a great example of how also partnerships don't have to be the same size companies or the same kind of stage company. I think that we're a 4.5-year-old company. We work with companies much older than us. And I think that's also great as well. Like people can bring different things to each other at different stages. And I think that's sneaky one of the reasons why fintech has boomed so fast over the last decade is fintech has had partnerships. And I think partnerships is just intrinsic to every fintech now, which is pretty cool to see.
Yeah, it's definitely helps. I mean, at this summer, one of my big projects has been working with a large North American bank that's launching as a reseller of BigCommerce, and that will be public in mid-September, I think. And that's a really large organization working with us as a smaller fintech, and we have the existing product, can move as a speedboat kind of alongside their aircraft carrier, right, and help bring them a capability that they feel they needed to use an external partner for. And sometimes there can be quite a lot of friction in contracting and things when, we sent them a short contract and they send us back, quite war and peace. But large orgs, regulated orgs, can be really challenging to work with. But it's super rewarding when you see those relationships come together because they can harness the power of a smaller, more agile organization.
Okay, it's time to get to know Michaela better with a round of quick fire questions. Michaela, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Favorite payment method?
Apple Pay.
Half marathon or triathlon?
Triathlon.
In-store or online?
In-store.
Restaurant or takeaway?
Restaurant.
Favorite holiday destination?
Bhutan.
That's a good one. Best advice you've received?
Oof, you're going to stump me on this one. Best advice I've received. Show up early.
Okay. US or UK?
Don't make me do that.
And one thing you change about payments?
What would I change about payments? More senior women or women in general. I think payments is such an interesting industry, and it saddens me that we continue to not see the diversity of our customer base and the professional world at large reflected in payments, especially at senior leadership roles. So I really hope that we continue to make progress there.
Well said. So pivoting slightly, you touched on it earlier, and I want to go back to that. You talked about sales and partnerships and how there's definitely, if you think about a Venn diagram, there's definitely an overlap between those two roles. So what would you say is the biggest similarity, but also the biggest difference between sales and partnerships?
So I think the biggest difference is you're not just completing a transaction, right? When I think about the big commerce sales team, they're selling a piece of software to a customer, Socks Co. And if I'm the account executive on that, once that contract is signed, that customer moves into implementation. They have an implementation manager, a solution architect, they get a customer success manager. I'm lightly involved in the account, but I'm kind of moving on to close another deal. The partnership, it's not just one transaction, right? You need to build to last. And so that's where you're not just building something for a single transaction or a single quarter to hit quota. The most successful partnerships are, this is a strategic benefit to both parties. This is going to carry us forward through multiple years, product launches, etc. So I think that's the sales difference. Is not quite as transactional. Partnerships is much longer. I think the commonality is, I'm sure someone will have an example of when this isn't true, but most partnerships need to be commercially or like broadly beneficial to both organizations. And I think sometimes partner people can lose focus on the revenue and the commercial side, right? I mean, what's going to keep you resourcing a partnership and doing co-marketing and working together is that you're getting something out of it. Most likely it is commercial related, whether that's pipeline building, supporting your merchants, retention, cross-sell. But you need to have something that is the thread there. It's not just that you and I seem to have a good ideal customer overlap. So like maybe we should work together. You got to have something that kind of draws you together. And that's that commercial sales element that I think is really important to partnerships. That's a commonality with more straight sales.
And do you think like a good salesperson can be a good partnerships person and like vice versa? It feels like almost like a good partnerships person could be a good salesperson, but maybe a salesperson might not be the best partnerships person because maybe they lack that longevity, that longer term view.
I think if you have a customer lifecycle AE, that's used to closing a deal and staying involved with a customer, I think that can be a really good foundation to be a partner person. So I think some salespeople can be really excellent partner people. I think the partner people that can cross over to sales can manage more traditional sales cycles, like working to a quota, can be kind of, depends on the product you're selling, but that can be a much more brutal kind of P&L world, right? So I do think there can be crossover, but you, as and I'm actually interviewing quite a lot right now. You and I talked about. So I've seen some salespeople trying to come over to partners, and then we have some partner people that want to move over to be AEs. And I think you have to have an awareness of what those roles take in terms of skill set to move over.
Interesting. And we actually talked earlier around like partnerships being much more cross-functional, which I don't think sales teams are necessarily as cross-functional.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I agree.
And one of the key relationships, and I'm biased because I work in product, is with the product function,
Yes.
right? And I think I'd love to pick your brain on like how you see partnerships and product working together, and like what does good look like to you?
Yeah. So there's a couple different ways that I work with product. So one is really to, from a strategic perspective, look at our set of features and functionality and what we offer to customers, and think whether, if we're going to add a new feature or functionality, should that be something that we build in-house, or is that something that is available through a partner? And BigCommerce is a very partner-led organization. We have over 1,000 technology partners.
Wow.
We have hundreds of payment partners or payment adjacent partners. So we have definitely, as an organization, been a little bit more push towards partners in terms of adding functionality for marketing technology and advanced search and tax and shipping and all sorts of things. So that's a really important strategic question that, product, we work on with product, which is there a company that I should go and start a partnership with where we want to offer their product because we think that that's a great feature for our customers to have access to? Or is that something that we may be able to build in-house and offer natively? And then the second piece is working closely with partners on what features are they offering on the platform, to our customers, and can we have a feedback cycle from partners to BigCommerce and BigCommerce to partners on ways we can continue to improve for the merchants that we serve.
And are you trying to get your product team in the same room as like the product team of your partners and getting them to ideate
often.
together?
Yeah, often. We work with, so some of the payment partners we work with really closely, PayPal, we just worked on their Fastlane accelerated,
you're a beta partner.
Accelerated checkout launch. So we did the alpha and the beta for that. So that was a very fun project because the product teams were virtually essentially co-located, really working on that, right? And providing support for merchants and looking at the data and working incredibly closely. Stripe is another partner of ours where the product teams have a really common dialogue and mutual Slack channels and things between each other and do a lot of support for merchants, right? And customers that may have issues or ask for features or success. So I think that's really critical, especially in payments, because the payments and then platforms, we've got to work hand in hand. One doesn't really work without the other. So those teams have to be really connected.
And maybe just the last question on this, like how do you think around partnering to solve those merchant problems, but maybe building or even acquiring those services? How do you kind of balance that? So you talked around like Fastlane, PayPal.
Yeah.
Let's imagine like BigCommerce wanted to build their own equivalent solution. Like how
Sure.
do you navigate that complex environment? Because I imagine you'll get knock on the door being like, hey, why aren't you using our solution?
Yeah. It's a great question. And from a BigCommerce perspective, we have been partner first. So we haven't, unlike other platforms, offered or penalized merchants for not using white labeled solutions. What we have done is we have made a few acquisitions of partners over the years where we felt that we wanted that native functionality. So earlier this year, we acquired MakeSwift, which was a partner of ours. That is a graphics editing tool that we thought was super cool, really an excellent addition to our platform, and also rolls into some of our evolution into headless and overall product strategy. A few years ago, we acquired Feedonomics, the channel management solution. They had been a partner of ours. So we are making kind of acquisitions where we feel there's native functionality we want to add in. But it can be really challenging to build. If you acquire something or roll in functionality, there may be partners in your ecosystem that are doing the same thing. But ultimately, if merchants have free choice, then it's everyone has to prove themselves on value, features, usability, merchant experience. But it is kind of a healthy tension, I think, overall with what do partners offer versus as a platform, what native features do you offer to your customers or add-ons?
Hence the frenemies, right?
Hence frenemies, yeah.
So I'd love to pivot a little bit more to your experience on e-commerce.
Sure.
What role does payments play for an e-commerce platform?
So I think there's two questions. One is what role I think payments plays is incredibly important because unless you have a non-transacting store for some reason, right, where you just have a website in the ether, payments is how your business runs, right? Without payments, you cannot accept revenue. You don't have a business. How do some customers view payments as part of their e-commerce store? Some of them understand the strategic importance. Some of them view it as a little bit of an afterthought, I would say, where I still talk to customers who have the world's most beautiful websites, really very cool, modern, switched on, incredible graphics. And then you get to payments and the checkout is clunky, or
You have to select Visa debit.
that's my I think, Theo, my personal pet peeve is having to select a card type when your checkout should know based on the 16-digit, your PAN, the 16-digit number. Checkout is your customer experience, right? As a customer, if I have an easy and seamless checkout experience, I see the payment methods I want, that translates to brand experience. That's user experience overall. And some of the brands that we see be really successful today really get that and understand that part of building your persona as a brand has to carry through with checkout and shipping and all these post-order actions that really seal the deal to have customer loyalty, because it's such a competitive market, especially if you're selling, Adidas sneakers in a size 9.
Yep.
How are you going to keep me coming back when I can just pop that into Google and whoever's paid the most for the results can pop that up and I'm just buying on price, right? It has to be, I like your brand, I like your company, I feel loyal, it's easy checkout, I've got a great experience, I feel a connection, and rarely do you feel a good connection to a brand if there's a really bad checkout or if your payment doesn't auth for seemingly no reason.
So payments have clearly changed how the checkout experience works, but merchants perhaps may not have that expertise to really understand the importance of payments because previously it was a commodity and now it's intrinsic to the journey. So how do you navigate those discussions with merchants and brands?
It can be really hard. And I think one of the things that we've started to understand more deeply is you've got two sets of stakeholders. You've got often the e-commerce team, right? They're in charge of running overall e-com and the website. And then there's the finance team. And one of the things that you have to navigate is the finance team may look at a piece of paper and say, well, you can't move payments providers unless you get a better rate than what we're getting currently from, provider X. And it's not all about the rate. Your credit card payment rate is only one piece of overall how you're going to get value from payments. If you uplift your conversion rate, that can make up for any, kind of cost increase on basic credit card fees. Offering net new buy now, pay later, using a fraud tool. Fraud can be a really significant problem for merchants, and not all merchants understand actually using a specialized provider can be really helpful to you. You can get indemnification. They can help you. You may be turning back good traffic because your rules are too restrictive. So it's a really important discussion to have with the finance team as a stakeholder and the e-com team to say, we think you could get more out of your pay stack. Let's think about what your overall conversion rate increase and benefit to your business could be by making some of these changes. It's not just that, I'm paying $189 today and someone's quoting me 209 and we could never do that, because finance says no. It's a much more nuanced discussion. And actually, we've seen a really cool home and garden customer of ours move from a legacy UK bank over to Stripe recently, and an amazing uplift in conversion. And they're so thrilled. They're now offering Apple Pay, and shockingly, over 50% of their transactions are on Apple Pay now.
Wow.
And they had no idea. And I think the thesis is that you're standing in your garden saying, oh, that looks dead. Got to get a new one of those. Or you're just in the moment, you're standing in line, wherever you're doing shopping. And that Apple Pay is so easy, and they're thrilled. But on paper, I think if it was just a financial discussion, you may not have had that conversation. Because the rates that you were getting from your legacy provider were, quote unquote, good. So it's really nuanced, but I think understanding the full value and impact is so important.
Yeah, I think what you said around Apple Pay is so true. We actually had the exact same experience with one of our retail merchants. They were like, oh, we think we should have Apple Pay. We were like, you probably should. And it became their most popular payment method within 6 weeks.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
So it's like really, really interesting. And it's like, I think what people don't quite realize is that payment methods, the value of them vary on the device that people are using, on the browser people are using, in the country that people are in. And I think unless you're exposed to it, you think the way that you pay is the same as the way that everyone else in the world pays. And I had no idea that digital wallets were such a big thing until I was exposed to it in APAC. No one just pays with a card.
Yeah.
Or in Germany, it's all like invoicing.
Or Ideal in the Netherlands, right? I mean, we have a lot of challenges sometimes working with Dutch merchants who just want to offer Ideal because it's actually extremely low cost for the merchant. And it is a common way to pay. But, that's probably really limiting your user base. And there's real opportunities to add other payment methods. And if you go into new markets, you've got to make that adjustment. So yeah, I think that's absolutely correct.
And with the payment methods, I think there's generally, actually, I think this applies to the checkout. There's a very interesting trade-off to be made. I'd love to get your thoughts on this between kind of optionality, speed, and security.
Yep.
How should brands think about those trade-offs? Because it's kind of zero-sum a little bit. If you want something really fast, you're probably trading off security. But if you've got something really secure, the barrier's higher and it's therefore a bit more frictionful. So how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I would probably push back on the notion that fast doesn't always have to be secure. I think Visa and MasterCard have Click to Pay coming out, which I know a lot of us have seen in the market. I think is now starting to get more traction with PSPs. We work with a lot of customers who are trialing. We talked about PayPal Fastlane, their accelerated solution, or are using a Skipify or a Stripe Link or a Bolt. So how can you make payments faster? Certainly in APAC and some of the more fintech startup-y APMs, I think there may be a concern of actually how fully regulated and secure is this checkout. But I think one of the concerns we have with customers is the localization of your checkout, right? I think that's the really important part. You have to work with a platform that is going to surface, and a payment provider that's going to surface the most commonly used payment methods in the region, even with a shopper profile, right? To try to ensure that you're going to get that ultimate conversion and they're going to complete a transaction, and not having the NASCAR style list of buttons. I think we've all seen there's a couple LinkedIn memes of having 30 checkout buttons. So it can be really tough, and especially in more emerging markets where there are so many potential APMs to use. I think we did an RFP for a customer that had a big APAC business, and I think in Indonesia alone, they had 8 or 10 listed, right? And it's thinking oof, how much volume could you possibly be pushing through the number 10 on this list?
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like payments very much a strategic priority, or should be a strategic priority. And I know you own payments at BigCommerce. Was it a strategic priority before you joined, or is that something that you brought to the table?
No, I would love to take credit for payments being a strategic priority at BigCommerce, but I think through with the kind of open SaaS partner-led strategy, payments has always been recognized as important. PayPal slash Braintree was a very early partner and foundational partner for BigCommerce. And this notion of having a more open choice, especially for mid-market and enterprise merchants who don't necessarily want to be pigeonholed into a single payment solution that may be white labeled, and have really dynamic businesses with different needs and different global and regional differences. That's always been a priority. So I am a steward of the strategy and hopefully continuing to push that forward. On my team, we've expanded our payments growth consultants. So those are the people that work with our merchants to help understand and optimize their pay stack and make introductions for them to partners. So we're continuing to push the strategy, but it has been a focus for BigCommerce. We know that has been a really critical piece of checkout, and it's a really critical piece to ensure our merchants are successful.
That's awesome. And I think we need more and more people to care about payments, because it's not going away. It's only going to become more and more important. Okay, so looking at the future of e-commerce now, what's one innovation or change that excites you the most? And what's one that keeps you up at night?
Keeping me up at night would be crypto. I think in general, both because of the literal pings in my LinkedIn from people who want me to add crypto as a payment method to BigCommerce, which is, let me assure you, numerous. I'm not sure how all these companies still exist. So that would be one where keeping me up at night is, in a highly regulated business, which all of our payment providers are, is crypto going to take off from a consumer facing with widespread adoption for kind of normal consumer use cases? I don't know. I don't know that would be a positive thing for our overall system. I think there's quite a lot of, KYC and kind of challenges with crypto, which I know some people may be huge crypto fans, but I'm personally, coming from a regulated world of kind of traditional finance, a bit of a crypto skeptic. But I hear it's really good for like laundering money and stuff. So I guess that it has a place in our global economy. And what I'm excited about is, I guess I would broadly say, more frictionless commerce experiences. I am a huge proponent of Just Walk Out in-store technology. So by our office in Liverpool Street, there's an Amazon store with Just Walk Out. I think that's super cool.
It's interesting though, because they had to add payments in store because people didn't want to just walk out.
Yes.
So why do you think that is? Because I thought that was like an interesting pivot. They didn't stick to the...
I think there's a consumer behavior element that they understand. There's a bit of a...
learning.
That it's a learning. Just with contactless. I mean, when contactless first came out, I remember being a little bit weirded out by contactless, especially coming from, chip and pin in Europe is obviously very different than in America. I was back in the US a few weeks ago. To send your credit card away with someone, to have them bring it back to you and sign a piece of paper, feels so crazy. So I think every area has their own nuances, but I think frictionless commerce, maybe Just Walk Out isn't going to take off wholeheartedly, but I think even just checking out where, if you go to JD Sports, and you throw all your items, or Decathlon, and you throw all your items in the big basket and it checks you out in like 10 seconds. I think anything that makes it more frictionless, easy to pay in person and then online. So accelerated checkout, saving down your card details, things that make it a little easier for you to be out and about in your daily life and transact, I think is really exciting. And we'll continue to see more, maybe some of the biometric payment methods will catch on as well. I don't know, we'll see.
Yeah, I hear WeChat are exploring technology with you pay with a hand scan.
So I've seen that you can get a manicure with a credit card chip. Yeah, so that you can pay with your nail.
Okay.
So maybe that's something for Money 2020 you could be walking around with. It could be a strategy. And I think they have had people who've had the chip, you get the chip injected or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you can just tap with Apple Pay why you would need the chip injected. But I think it's cool that people are pushing the limits of it, right? I think that's how we all innovate and see what catches on.
And when you think about frictionless, does that also apply to like being where the consumer is? Like social commerce for me feels like something that should be talked about more than it probably is. I think big commerce like have done something with TikTok in the past.
Yeah, so
Around
we do quite a lot we make it easy to integrate with TikTok Shop. We do quite a lot of our brands advertise on TikTok and sell through TikTok Shop and social media. We also work with a partner, Random Retail, to do buy online, pick up in store, same day delivery. So Harvey Nichols uses that technology, Brompton Bikes. And I think it's this notion of getting things quickly, getting things when you want them. And that's really cool. And so continuing to see evolution for brands where they may be fulfilling same day orders out of a store, working with platforms like BigCommerce that can facilitate that. And that kind of fits into the unified commerce flow, right? You don't actually care whether the stuff you order comes from a warehouse or a store. You just want it to come as fast as possible and in decent shape, right?
Hopefully.
So hopefully. So I think that actually gives brands a lot of flexibility if they can do more fulfillment out of store as well.
And do you think there's like a possible world where like you just only buy things from your social media platforms? Like you never have to navigate away, like the super app. Do you think that's like a possible world that we could live in?
Yeah, I think it is possible. I think as an Instagram user, I think the Instagram recommendations algorithm is frighteningly accurate. I have purchased a lot of stuff or see a lot of stuff that I would view as applicable to my buying persona.
Yeah.
And that sometimes excites me and sometimes gives me pause depending on the day. I don't know about the super app. I mean, I think that just consumer preferences are super diverse, but I think you'll continue to see this notion of integrated shopping experiences in your daily life, whether
Awesome.
it's in social commerce or elsewhere.
Thanks, Michaela, and thanks you all for listening. Make sure you subscribe to Payments Unfiltered so you get our next episode, and you can also follow our blog at primer.io. I'll see you next time.